What is up, y'all? It is time for our weekly check-in. We are on week 5, recovering a sense of possibility. My name is Melody, and you're watching the Disney Channel. Week 5 was another shorter chapter, kind of like week 4 was. It goes over 3 main talking points, which is limits, finding the river, and what she calls the virtue trap. And I think that what week 5 discusses will probably impact a lot of people. We do return back to morning pages and how important those are, and how, as we've been continuing the morning pages and utilizing those, just how much it changes our perspective and our outlook on life and other people. For instance, she touches on how by doing the morning pages, we come to find ourselves, by doing our morning pages, we start realizing that we're more gracious, less judgmental. Perhaps we have more patience towards others. And I think something a lot of people can work on is having more grace and more compassion in life. I think it's very easy to get into a type of superiority complex, and it's easy to judge other people without putting yourself in their shoes and seeing things from their perspective. Regardless if you're right and they're wrong, that's still something that is crucial to have, and you can't really effectively communicate with people and understand where they're coming from if you don't have grace, you don't have compassion, patience, and the willingness to not judge them and just hear them out. So when we talk about limits, which is her first point in week 5, what we're going over mostly is, like every other week, is it's building up on what we've been discussing, which is allowing goodness in your life, allowing opportunities, allowing yourself to believe in the possibility rather than assuming it's not going to happen, not minimizing what you want to do or trying to be realistic and be like, oh, well, maybe, I'm thinking too outside of the box. And we also, again, touch on the conflict that we go through internally of not taking ourselves seriously and then taking ourselves too seriously, where we get in this kind of being a rock stuck in a hard place where we end up self-sabotaging or falling into a lot of self-doubt because we can't find the balance in between both of those things. Either we're too afraid or our ego is kind of taking over and we don't want to feel embarrassed or stupid, or on the other side of things, we are afraid that we're dreaming too much, that we're being too selfish, too greedy, whatever it might be. And in trying to overcome either sides of those spectrums, a lot of time we bounce back and forth between that, is accepting that the universe, that God, that the higher power who is giving us our creativity, who is flowing it through us, is what she calls an unlimited bank account, an unlimited resource, and that we are not asking for too much or doing too much by accepting that reality and accepting it in our lives so that we can then make happen what we want to happen in our lives, what we want to happen in our creative endeavors and dreams. And piggybacking off of that, she says, we are stingy with ourselves, and if we received a gift beyond our imagining, we often send it back. As we've discussed previously, we doubt that we deserve it. We think it's too much and we shouldn't take it. We're scared of accepting the gift or opportunity because of what that might mean for us in our lives. So we fall back into the spiral of self-sabotage. The analogy that she uses mainly for accepting these opportunities and not doubting them and not finding excuses to reject them or deny them is to pray to catch the bus, then run as fast as you can. She says, for this to happen, first of all, we must believe that we are allowed to catch the bus. We come to recognize that God, or the universe, is unlimited in supply and that everyone has equal access. This begins to clear up any guilt about having or getting too much of it. And because everyone can take from this unlimited supply, everyone has the equal opportunity for it, we are depriving no one else of the abundance of it. We're not taking it from other people or stealing it from others. Everyone has this unlimited creativity within them that they can pull from, use, and express. And so it is within everyone's right to do with it what they will and to feed upon it. But that takes cooperating, that takes accepting it, that takes overcoming the guilt of if we're being too selfish or we're taking too much or what have you. She says one of the main reasons we do get into these mentalities is we start doing what she says is scarcity thinking. We don't want luck to run out. We don't want to find ourselves at the end of the tunnel and all of a sudden everything is taken from our grasp. We don't don't want to feel like we've reached a limit somewhere. We don't want to feel like we have extended ourselves and then there's nothing else left for us. And because of that, we limit our capabilities as creatives, what is possible for us to achieve and what is possible for us to do with our lives. Because of the fear of running out or not having enough, we tend to not even try or not even go for things out of the fear of it not being attainable, essentially. And she says, being that God, the universe, a higher power, whatever, is an unlimited supply, an unlimited bank account, we can find all things through this. Friends, lovers, money, ideas for songs, poems, paintings, resources for acting or writing. She says, very often when we cannot seem to find an adequate supply, it is because we are insisting on a particular human source of supply. We must learn to let the flow manifest itself where it will, not where we will it. She goes into a little bit of an example of how this one woman she knew was kind of in a toxic business relationship with one of her agents. It got to the point where she did eventually sever the tie, but she was too afraid to do so at first because she had fears of it ruining her career or feeling guilty that maybe she made the wrong choice by severing that connection. However, when she finally did decide to leave the business relationship and fire the agent, essentially, she found that about a week or two later, her husband had made a connection with someone he met who knew an agent and thus gave her the phone number, and they then began a business relationship, and she started a new path in her career that was really successful for her, which is also an example of synchronicity. So Julia points out that once this woman became willing to receive her good from whatever source it appeared in, she stopped being victimized. And I do think that we can fall into a little bit of a victim mindset and kind of like a boo-hoo, woe is me, pity party, and it can make us stuck because we're so busy feeling sorry for ourselves or feeling like we're at a standstill or a plateau that we never ever try and take a chance to pull ourselves out of it or to find another avenue where maybe we can get unstuck and find success or find something good, or maybe we don't put ourselves out there and therefore we don't meet people who could potentially help us and set us on a path where we are going to have more success or we are going to reach this goal. And we may very well get in that type of mentality, in that type of headspace because of something very traumatic or something that really hurt us. And as we've discussed in previous weeks now, it's not that we ignore that or we pretend that it doesn't matter or we be apathetic to it to numb the effects of it on us, to ignore how it's making us feel and how much it hurt. But sitting in it, recognizing it, you must then seek a way to overcome it and to realize that it's going to be okay and that we will come out on the other side, and it's not something that controls us and that is going to ruin our lives if we don't let it. We can make it out and we can get over that hump. We can still do what we set out to do even though something bad happened to us, and we deserve to do that for ourselves, and we deserve the good that will come out of the bad. Continuing this discussion with limits, she says the desire to be worldly, sophisticated, and smart often blocks our flow. We have ideas and opinions about where our good should come from, and she says creativity is a spiritual issue, which she said many times before. Any progress is made by leaps of faith, some small and some large. Again, we harp on the importance of audacity. We return to the importance of leaping, and thus the net will appear. We revisit the importance of allowing ourselves to explore, to try things, to be bad at something, and it's okay because we can become good at it. Not everyone is an expert. I know it's hard to accept, but when you first start out doing something new, you're not going to be that great at it, and it's okay. You don't have to be perfect immediately, and thinking that you do is probably going to hold you back from ever actually becoming good at something. And so she says here, at first we may take the faith to do our first dance class or learn a new medium, and then later we take an even larger step of faith by maybe taking a harder dance class, trying new things in the medium that we picked up. Maybe we start looking for a mentor. Maybe we go on creative vacation, if you will, something that is again nourishing, feeding our creative self. And because we're doing all of this, we're taking these leaps of faith, we're giving ourselves the opportunity to experience and to progress in something we enjoy. We may even start seeing creative ideas of our own flourishing marching. Maybe because we're taking this dance class, all of a sudden we're coming up with our own choreography to something. This ties back into synchronicity, where when we start accepting the good and we start embracing that and realizing there is possibility in our lives for these creative dreams to become real for us, we might notice around us that things are triggering synchronous good in our lives. And she says, if this still sounds airy-fairy to you, ask yourself bluntly what next step you are evading. What dream are you discounting as impossible given your resources? What payoff are you getting for remaining stuck at this point in your expansion? Yes, God, the universe, etc. is an unlimited source and an effective source, but you have to be willing to accept it and take from the well if you want it to actually do anything for you. And she gives a good task in regards to our morning pages that kind of helps with these limitations and these limited beliefs. She says, at night before we go to sleep, we can list areas in which we need guidance and stuff we need answers for, stuff we're wondering about. And then in the morning, revisiting those ideas and writing about them in our morning pages and seeing if we make any discoveries or if we find any answers in that. And she ends it with, be open to all help, which I actually think is a really good task. And it was something that I honestly didn't focus on in week 5. So I think with week 6, I might actually try to start implementing that. Moving on, we have what she calls finding the river. And this is the introduction to the virtue trap section, which we will get to. Finding the river. So essentially, we're finding a place where we accept that we are making the right decisions for our creative life. What we love is what we're meant to do, and that we no longer are going to depend on outside factors and other people in our lives to try and give us these solutions, essentially, or depending on them to fix things about ourselves. Really kind of revisiting the idea of codependency and boundaries. The more that I am doing in this book, the more I'm seeing a recurring theme of holding firm in your boundaries and not falling into codependency with others is really important in all aspects of life, but especially creatively. She begins saying how we've been working on our self-doubt, our self-sabotage, our denial of opportunities, our fear of actually being successful, our fear of having audacity and putting ourselves out there. And now that we've kind of started working on those things and overcoming them and finding some hope and faith in our lives with our creative endeavors, she says we have begun to hope, but we have also begun to fear that hope. She continues with saying how a shift to spiritual dependency rather than human dependency is gradual. It will be slowly but surely. And as we become more true to ourselves, we become more open to the positive. And as I was saying before, with all the exercises we've been doing with morning pages, our boundaries, letting go of codependency, we find, she says, we are able to tell more of our truth, hear more of other people's truths, and encompass a far more kindly attitude towards both. We are becoming less judgmental of ourselves and others. And like I said at the beginning, the reason that this has started taking over in our lives, this outlook of having more grace, of having more compassion, more patience, is due to our creative recovery and what we've been doing with our morning pages, which is releasing all of the mess, all of the hullabaloo onto our pages and getting that out and releasing that so that we then don't project that onto other people. She says, we see that our moods, views, and insights are transitory. We acquire a sense of movement and a current change in our lives. This current, or river, is a flow of grace moving us to our right livelihood, companions, and destiny. She says, dependence on the creator within is really freedom from all other dependencies. And paradoxically, it is also the only route in real intimacy with other human beings. She says, freed from our terrible fears of abandonment, we are able to live more spontaneity. Freed from our constant demands for more and more reassurance, our fellows are able to love us back without feeling so burdened. As we have listened to our artist child within, it has begun to feel more and more safe. Feeling safe, it can now speak a little louder. Even on our worst days, we will hear our inner child, our positive voice, saying, you could still do this, or it might be fun to do that, ... She repeats again how the morning pages also render us to be less rigid, less closed off. So she says recovery is the process of finding the river and saying yes to its flow, rapids, and all. As we're doing the artist way and we're going about each week in the themes, Julia consistently is using different metaphors for us to understand that we need to say yes to things and allow things to happen in our lives. It's rivers, catching the bus, leap and the net will appear, pushing the door open just slightly and slightly and slightly more. All of these things are just imagery that she's trying to use to get it through our fucking brains that we need to accept good and we are worthy of it. And she goes into like kind of a fun little anecdote about this lawyer who was really cut and dry, very black and white, no gray, and how as she began to really open up more and work on her creative recovery, she found that she actually had so much more livelihood within her and that she was able to have fun and be more spontaneous, and that she was finding that she had more positivity and a greater outlook on life that wasn't so dreary or defeatist and negative. Julia says, by gaining this newly positive attitude in our lives is the beginning of us gaining trust within ourselves and within others. She also says, which I kind of touched on earlier, that this compassion that we're also starting to feel is one of the first fruits of aligning our creativity with its creator. As we come to trust and love our internal guide, we lose our fear of intimacy because we no longer confuse our intimate others with the higher power we are coming to know. She kind of compares this to idolatry in a way where we are so dependent on other people to give us happiness, to give us answers, when really that dependency should be within ourselves, and that's actually where we find the answer to all those things is within. Of course, with anyone, this can be a very, very difficult thing. Relationships are complex. Trusting ourselves and being safe with ourselves can be very, very difficult sometimes, and so it can be definitely a scary process, but a necessary one. Ending this segment with finding the river and embracing its flow and the good that will come to you as you do embrace it. We can get stuck in the thought of, well, we still can't fully depend on the universe or God or this spiritual creativity within us. We still need to go out and do the footwork, which she says, yes, there is credibility in that. You know, you do have to go out and put things in motion. However, it's not always going to be something linear. You're not always going to do something and immediately you get exactly what it is that you intended to. Specifically, she says that while footwork is necessary, I have seldom seen it pay off in a linear fashion. It works more like we shake the apple tree and the universe delivers oranges. So we do have to accept that and not let that discourage us. And finally, as we've been saying for the past 4 weeks, one of the central tasks of creative recovery is learning to accept this generosity that we've been discussing. Leaping off of our limited beliefs, our limitations we put on ourselves, continuing the belief of finding the river and accepting its flow and its grace and allowing it to move through us. We have to also come to the realization that we get caught in what she calls the virtue trap, and that this can be probably one of the biggest roadblocks in our lives that limit our capacity for creativity, that suck the joy out of our lives. And it's a mentality and a complex that we can often get stuck in, where we end up abandoning ourselves, abandoning our inner child, and we deny ourselves what we need in order to not only flourish in our creative lives, but to be a good friend, a good support system for other people around us. If we deny ourselves, what am I trying to say? If we deny ourselves what is crucial and necessary so that we can prioritize our wants and needs in life, we will then get into a state of coasting and going with the flow in a way, if you will, and it can be very detrimental to us. You know, we've talked about how shame holds us back. We've talked about how lack of boundaries holds us back. We've talked about how if we're constantly only showing up for others and doing things for others and prioritizing others before our own needs and wants every single time, that it will drain us. So Julia starts by saying, an artist must have downtime, time to do nothing. Remember how we've been talking about solitude and being alone and allowing that to be our way to be creative and have a creative safe space. She says, an artist must have downtime, time to do nothing. Defending our right to such time takes courage, conviction, and resiliency. Such time, space, and quiet will strike our family and friends as a withdrawal from them. It is. For an artist, withdrawal is necessary. Without it, the artist in us feels vexed, angry, out of sorts. If such deprivation continues, our artist becomes sullen, depressed, and hostile. We eventually become like cornered animals, snarling at our family and friends to leave us alone and stop making unreasonable demands. We are the ones making unreasonable demands. We expect our artist to be able to function without giving it what it needs to do so. An artist requires the upkeep of creative solitude. An artist requires the healing time of alone. Without this period of recharging, our artist becomes depleted. And over time, it can be even worse, where our artist faces a type of death. And what I thought was interesting about this is when we start neglecting our own needs, betraying our boundaries, not saying no to others when we know we can't show up the way we have to, or maybe we're just too tired, we're overwhelmed. By denying that and by being a yes man, essentially, we can start actually, which we've talked about previously, blaming others for our inability to remain true to our boundaries and true to ourselves. We start blaming others when we are not being honest about how we feel and about what we're going through. And that can be so easy to fall into, especially when, and she had a really good quote by Toni Morrison, which I really liked, and I'm going to say here. We are traditionally rather proud of ourselves for having slipped creative work in there between the domestic chores and obligations. I'm not sure we deserve such big A pluses for that. So she gives some kind of examples where we start blaming other people when we are really depleted and feeling kind of empty. She says, woe to the spouse who doesn't take the hint. Woe to the hapless child who's not giving you solitude. When we keep denying ourselves our time of recovery, our alone time, our safe space, we get to the point of saying, what's the use? Which in turn replaces our feelings of joy and satisfaction in life. Now, of course, we may go through the actions of continuing our life. We might even still be producing creatively, but we are leeching blood from ourselves and vampirizing our souls. And that leads us to getting into the nitty gritty of the virtue trap. And she says, for many creatives, the belief that they must be nice and worry about what will happen with their friends, family, mates if they dare do what they really want to constitutes a powerful reason for non-action. So we will just shut down or start coasting in order to keep up this facade and look nice. We're dependable. We're not selfish. We're always putting everyone else before us. Just so generous. And what does that do? As we were just saying, we blame others, but also we start holding resentment towards others. We start looking at others and we resent them for what they're taking from us and what they're doing that we can't do. One of her examples is a woman with 2 small children wants to take a pottery class. It conflicts with some of her son's Little League practices and she wouldn't be able to attend as a faithful audience member. She cancels pottery and plays the good mother, seething on the sidelines with resentment. And I mean, I actually really like that example because I feel like specifically mothers lose so much of themselves and their identity that all they are is mom, and that is it. They are mom 24/7, and who they were before they were a mother gets buried deep down, and sometimes they never ever exhume it. And so at the core of the virtue trap that we get stuck in is this facade, is this sense of superiority that we're so good and that we're so kind and that we do so much for people. In a way, we kind of see ourselves as martyrs because it's like we're sacrificing and we're denying ourselves because we're such good people. I just care so much about them. Like, I'm doing this and it makes us feel good. It feeds our ego. Everyone thinks we're such great people, but really we're killing ourselves on the inside by never being able to say no and by never saying yes to us. She says that many recovering creatives sabotage themselves most frequently by being nice. Many of us have made a virtue out of deprivation. We have used this to feed a false sense of spirituality grounded in being good, meaning superior. This spiritual superiority is really only one more form of denial, and for an artist, this can be deadly. The urge toward respectability and maturity can be stifling and even fatal. We strive to be good, to be nice, to be helpful, to be unselfish. We want to be generous, of service, of the world, but what we really want is to be left alone. And I'm like, by golly, if that's not true, all that ne what is. And this gets into the point of, if we can't get others to leave us alone, we eventually abandon ourselves so that we again maintain this facade, so that we can just go into a kind of a coasting where we're just doing things. It's what we're supposed to do and it's what we've been told we're supposed to do and it's making other people happy, so we're gonna keep doing it. It can get so bad that we also start becoming out of sorts. We realize that we've checked out of life, that now it kind of feels like an out-of-body experience. We're gone and we're not really here. And as many of us know, a lot of us would call this disassociating. She calls it leaving the scene of the crime. Come out wherever you are, we wheedle. But our creative self no longer trusts us. Why should it? We sold it out. Afraid to appear selfish, we lose ourself. We become self-destructive, but we are often blind to the poisonous grip that the virtue trap, that self-destruction, that self-sabotage has on us. And as we end the discussion of the virtue trap, the main question we must ask ourselves is, are you destructive of yourself? Are you self-destructive? And many of us, being in denial because we feel like we're such good people and we're doing so many good things, are going to say no. But in reality, if you are denying yourself solitude, if you are denying yourself the ability to recuperate, if you are denying yourself time to work on stuff you want to work on, if you're denying yourself fun, if you're constantly saying yes to other people and blowing off things that you want to do and things that are important to you, is that not self-destructive? And it's okay to say yes, that you are being self-destructive. Everyone has been at some point in their lives, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that you failed. And piggybacking off of this, because sometimes self-destructive nature is not always seen outwardly, maybe you're not indulging in drug use, maybe you're not binging alcohol or ignoring self-care. So on the outside, sure, it looks like you're fine. Other people might not see you as self-destructive. They might see you as the good husband, the good mom, the good teacher. But that is because you have constructed a false self that looks good to the world and meets with a lot of worldly approval. And this false self is always patient, always willing to defer its needs to meet the needs or demands of others. Another good quote she had here, which I will read, is by Leslie M. McIntyre. Nobody objects to a woman being a good writer or sculptor or geneticist if at the same time she manages to be a good wife, good mother, good looking, good tempered, well groomed, and unaggressive. Continuing this self-destructive nature, this facade, we may be triggered by, in the past as a child, being accused of being selfish, of being better than others, or having a superiority complex. And because of this, we find that actually prioritizing ourselves and saying no to other people to be a character flaw, to be seen as something bad. But being selfish is not always a bad thing, and we deserve to prioritize ourselves. When creatives who are caught in the virtue trap are still having trouble accepting it, are still having trouble admitting that they are being self-destructed and they are denying their true self and true identity. Again, remember authenticity. They cannot show their true selves to the world without dreading the world's continued disapproval. Her example is, this man says no, he can't help his friend move his furniture next weekend because he wants to go to a play. And his friend is like, how could you be so selfish? And plus, when did you get so cultured anyways? She says, this man knows full well that if he stops being so nice, that his outsized nice guy alter ego will bite the dust. Another example, she says, martyred Mary knows the same thing as she agrees to round 5 of babysitting for her sister so that she can go out. Saying no to her sister would be saying yes to herself, and that is a responsibility that Mary just cannot handle. Free on a Friday night, what would she do with herself? That's a good question, and one of the many that Mary and other creatives use their virtue to ignore. And I mean, that also begs the question of, are you the one being selfish, or is it all these other people who are leeching off of you and not considering that maybe you also deserve time where people help you, or maybe you have time off? So who is actually selfish? Continuing, are you self-destructive is a question that the apparently virtuous would be bound to answer with a resounding no. They conjure up a list proving how responsible they are, but responsible to whom? The question is, are you self-destructive, not do you appear self-destructive? And it's most definitely not, are you nice to other people? So, and she ends it with this: we listen to other people's ideas of what is self-destructive without ever looking at whether their self and our self have similar needs. Caught in the virtue trap, we refuse to ask ourselves, what are my needs? What would I do if it weren't too selfish? And this can be very, very difficult to answer. And so she gives us kind of an exercise where, what are some things you'd be interested in if you knew you wouldn't be judged for them, if you didn't feel like it was selfish for you to indulge in them? And then she then asks you to kind of extrapolate on that and kind of how you would take action to do it. And she also does what she calls a virtue trap quiz. And so she goes through 10 different points where you're just supposed to off the cuff answer them and kind of get a little bit. And then she finally ends it by saying, by seeking the creator within and embracing our own gift of creativity, we learn to be spiritual in this world, to trust that God, the universe, universe, a higher power, is good, and so are we, and so is all of creation. In this way, we avoid the virtue trap. So after finishing the virtue trap and the virtue trap quiz, there was a couple of exercises she has you do, forbidden joys, a wish list, and those are kind of things that you can maybe revisit and see if you can put any of those into action, or maybe you could take some of that and make it into an artist date. And then the tasks this week were a lot of list making and a lot of what she calls image filing. And we had a little bit of time travel-y things too. So 2 of them were, if I were 20 and had money, list 5 adventures that you would go on, and she encourages you to add images of what these would look like. The second one is, if I were 65 and had money, list 5 postponed pleasures, and again to collect images. A couple of the other ones were list 10 ways you're mean to yourself, 10 items you would like to own that you don't have, and again encouraging you to have images to support these. And idea behind that is manifestation, and she says a lot of the times if we have images to reference to look at, to kind of inspire us, we might be surprised how much easier it is to attain those things. She also has list 5 grievances against God, the reasons that you can't really believe in a supportive God. She does have you revisit the imaginary lives again, and then some of the other things is kind of more so exercises to do in your morning pages. So creative blocks, who you might be blaming for being blocked in your life. So those are mostly the exercises. I will say these were probably some of my least favorite ones. It's like, I think most people can relate. I don't have a printer at my house. You know, magazines are not $5 anymore, so I'm not about to go out and spend $60 on magazines just to fucking do scrapbooking, which I do enjoy. Like, I actually find that kind of fun. I used to like making collages, but I did find it a little bit more annoying because I really had to go out of my way to print out images. So the way I'm doing it is I actually have this little cork board, so I am periodically printing out stuff, and I'm gonna have a little collage of just places I want to go, things I want to have, goals and stuff, and put it on there. I think that might be kind of fun. So I have started on that, but it's not finished yet. And I did go back and use one of the other images from a previous exercise that I'll put on there too. So those were the tasks. I'll read off, I guess, my grievances with God, because that is still, I think, out of everything in this book, the one thing that I still have the most difficulties with resonating is this idea of spirituality and talking to a spiritual being. So my 5 grievances were the following. 1, the name God to me carries so much negative connotation. The idea of salvation makes no sense, and I find it heartless to make humanity suffer over one mistake. 2, so much of what I want in my life has not happened, and oftentimes it feels like it never will. To expand on that, it's kind of like, why would I rely on a God or an external spiritual force if they've never done shit for me in the first place? 3, horrible people have amazing lives and tons of money, so why the fuck are so many people suffering? 4, what has she, he, they, it ever really done for me to begin with? 5, if it's so all-knowing and powerful, then why does it seem so weak and uninvolved in what's going on in the world? So those are my 5 grievances. You know, maybe I'll find out some things about it, you know, maybe it'll speak to me. This brings up like a past task. I think we actually were supposed to do it for week 4 was making our own artist prayer, and I have yet to actually complete it. And week 5, one of the tasks is actually to read your artist prayer every day. As you can see, I got not even 2 full sentences in. So I don't know. I mean, I will try it. I don't want to be closed-minded, but it's not necessarily a task that is speaking to me or that I feel really matters. But that being said, just overall, and we always go through the same 4 questions. My morning pages, I did every day besides Sunday. So I have been doing pretty good, but I was feeling a little unmotivated some days to write them. However, that being said, a lot of my recent morning pages have actually been past the 3-page minimum, you know, requirement for them. So I have been finding that, especially when I allow myself more time to write them, that I actually will have more to say and think on. I will say I can't necessarily say I'm reaching breaking points or creative epiphanies when I'm writing my morning pages. I do feel a little stifled sometimes in the mornings, or sometimes I even feel rushed because I just don't want to wake up at the ass crack of dawn some days just to write morning pages. And I know that's like what she says is like throwing a temper tantrum or whatever. whatever. But if I do get into that space where I feel rushed or like I don't have much time to really focus on it, it almost starts feeling kind of like a chore. And so I just want to write whatever to just get it done. But again, that being said, there have been some days where I am finding myself writing more about just things I'm thinking about rather than just like a recap of my day before or whatever. So, you know, there's like good things happening in the midst of all that. My creative date or my artist date was bare to none. It was almost kind of like I just had sporadic mini dates throughout the week. You know, I worked on some creative projects I would like to do. I did some of my coloring book. I did like a little bit of a crafting session for karaoke where I made a fake barbell for one of our numbers we were doing, but I didn't necessarily go out and do something that felt like a date per se. So I did neglect that area, I will say, this past week. So that is something I want to make sure I bounce back on for week 5. Synchronicity, my main thing was, well, I've been really positive and really engaged with karaoke and really like supporting the group, and we've won both nights. So, I mean, that's something. So I'm going to take that. For the final question of if there was any issues that arise, again, I wouldn't say yes or no to this. I did find myself feeling more inspired to clean and do some side projects I've been wanting to do this week. But again, like I was saying, I was feeling a little bit unmotivated with the morning pages, and I found myself like kind of finding other things to do that I would get distracted with, and you know, it would take me longer to get to them and write them. So there was that. I mean, I still did them though. I still did them. And because I felt kind of busy with the karaoke stuff for a lot of the days with just planning and everything and organizing that, I actually did start on a lot of these tasks really last minute, and I didn't, I think, set really like a good amount of time aside to actually focus on them and do them. So I did kind of get into a little bit of a procrastination zone with that. So that is something I kind of want to make sure I don't fall into with the following weeks, because I don't want to feel like I'm falling behind or like I'm not able to keep up with the tasks and assignments that we have for each week. Overall though, still a good week. I really like the message in the chapter and the talking points, and I like especially the virtue trap section, and I think that was really, really good advice and something to consider and be mindful of in the future, especially. Like the assignments were not my favorite this week, but I did as many as I could still. I'll show y'all once I'm done with my little corkboard collage what it looks like. It's still in the making though. So that was week 5. We now go on to week 6. I did start week 6 a little late. It is what it is. Thank you for watching and enduring the struggle with me. I will see y'all's next week sometime. Like, comment, share, subscribe, stream my music, or have 7 years of bad luck. And is that what you want? I don't think so.